Every mushroom has a story. Well, maybe that's not true, but at least everyone's got a nice big pile of dried mushrooms at home that they cherish. Well, maybe that's not true either, but I have a nice pile of dried mushrooms, and each one of these mushrooms does have a story, and I wanted to talk to you about those today. The thing about dried mushrooms is they never really look that impressive, and this little wrinkly boy is no different. This mushroom is called Agaricus Blazei, and it's actually in the exact same genus as button mushrooms, or Agaricus bisporus. But instead of just being used on your pizza, Agaricus Blazei is actually a pretty powerful medicinal mushroom. And it's cultivated, but it only grows in a very few specific places like China and Brazil. So the farm that I got this from was super cool. I ended up getting on the back of somebody's motorbike, and I drove through this tiny little village in this remote piece of farmland, and they were growing Agaricus Blazei, and it was really cool how they were growing. They were growing in these beds, very similar to how you might grow button mushrooms, but they were growing it on a combination of compost and reeds, and it was a substrate that was very specific to that area and very specific to growing Agaricus Blazei. I wouldn't say it's an advanced cultivation technique, but it's obviously very specific. You need to know what you're doing in order to grow this one at scale. So it was pretty amazing to see it. The other thing that was super interesting is quite often when you think about Agaricus mushrooms or button mushrooms, you think really cool and damp temperatures, but Agaricus Blazei is definitely a heat-loving mushroom, which explains why it's grown in warmer climates. So when I was at the Agaricus Blazei farm, it was really, really hot, like 35 degrees Celsius basically, inside the area where it was growing. If you've ever had a chance to eat this mushroom, I highly recommend it. It is also a delicious gourmet mushroom that tastes amazing when it's cooked. It's one of the best mushrooms I've ever tried, but you might also see it in supplemental form where Agaricus Blazei is used as a medicinal mushroom. This next mushroom, or this glob of mushrooms, is really only grown as a novelty, and I only wanted to grow it just to see if it would work. And the reason I wanted to is because it actually glows in the dark. This is called Panellus Stipticus. It's a mushroom that has bioluminescent properties, and as you can see, it didn't really grow that well. I mean, again, it's not typically cultivated because there's no reason why you would ever grow it, because you can't eat it and it's not medicinal. But again, it does glow in the dark, and it's really cool to see. And in fact, Jesse, it'd be cool if you could go see if this still glows.
Yeah, okay.
I don't actually know if it glows in the dark or not, but
Okay.
let's find out. Find the darkest spot.
Glowing mushroom in the closet. You on the other side?
Does it glow?
I don't think so.
Here, take the camera in with you actually. See if you can pick it up a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of bioluminescence.
No?
Nothing. Maybe it has to be fresh, I don't know.
Well, that didn't work, but you'll just have to trust me. And actually, again, I do have a picture of this when I first grew it. It did look pretty impressive just with my eyes when I first saw it. I guess this mushroom, Panellus Stipticus, it will be the most bioluminescent when it's sporulating, and I think the whole idea is to attract other insects to kind of get attracted to the spores and then spread the spores far and wide. But yeah, I guess, 4 or 5 year old wrinkly glob of Panellus Stipticus doesn't glow anymore, but I'm still gonna keep it. So this next one is not a loofah, not something you use in the shower. It's actually Tremella, or Tremella Fuciformus. And this mushroom is really cool. It's sometimes called the beauty mushroom because it does have some properties, some medicinal properties, and people will use it in beauty products or they use it for skin health. And it's also sometimes used in drinks. So it's kind of like a jelly fungus when it's fresh. So people will put it in drinks and you can also just eat it. But the thing that's cool about Tremella mushroom and why I'm so happy to have this one is that it's so freaking hard to grow, and it took people forever to figure out how to actually grow it. And here's why. Tremella isn't something that will actually just fruit off a log. It's a mycoparasite, meaning it fruits off of other fungi. So in order for this thing to grow, it needs to first attack another mushroom before it fruits. Now, if you see it growing in the wild, you would never know this, right? You just see a mushroom growing on a log and you would harvest it and you'd be like, wow, that's cool, that's rare. I could probably grow these things on logs. But then when people tried to grow it on logs, it didn't really work until some really smart farmers figured it out. So basically the way you have to grow this is first you inoculate a log with Hypoxylon archeri. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's a mushroom. And then you inoculate that mushroom with Tremella Fuciformus. Tremella Fuciformus will eat the other mushroom and eventually form these beautiful loofah-looking fruiting bodies. Now, the farm where I got this from was super cool. When I was there, these were fruiting all over the place like crazy. They were all perfectly sized. They were all beautiful and gorgeous. And it was just amazing to see how successful these cultivators were at growing this mushroom at scale. And when I was there, after juggling some fruiting bodies and kind of having fun, one of the farmers just handed me a whole tremella log and said, "Here, take this." Didn't really know what to do with it, but I was pretty happy to have it. So I took it with me and I carried it around with me for a bunch. And then I eventually took the fruiting bodies and dried it, and this is what we have right now. So Tremella Fuciformus, super cool mushroom. Never grown it myself, but I think it'd be something that's really cool to try. But either way, I'm happy to have this dried fruiting body. Do you think it's possible for a mushroom channel to get to 1 million subscribers? We think it's possible, and we want you to be a part of it. So if you like mushroom content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, while you're down there, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow, and we appreciate it so much. Some of you might have seen the 5-gallon bucket oyster mushroom grow that we did, and while I was filming that video, one of the clusters didn't work out so well, and that's this freaky looking thing. So this is actually a cluster of blue oyster mushrooms, and as you can see, like, it was gonna be a really big, beautiful cluster of mushrooms, and you can see all these tiny little fruiting bodies. But what happens when mushrooms don't get the proper temperature, or more so in this case, the proper humidity, is they can sometimes abort, which means basically they just stop growing and they just wrinkle up. And that's why this formed this perfect, nice cluster that was just about to explode in a big cluster of mushrooms, and then aborted, and ended up just being this weird asteroid-looking things. And actually, interestingly enough, a couple fruiting bodies did start to grow out of that cluster, and you can kind of see those little things here right now. Yeah, I like to keep this around, and it's kind of fun to look at. So if you're growing mushrooms and you want to avoid something like this in your grows, just make sure you keep your mushrooms hydrated, especially in the early stages of growth, so you don't end up with something like this. This next one you wouldn't think is that special because it's literally just a dried cluster of pink oyster mushroom, but I grew it, harvested it, took a really nice picture of it, and now it's a blanket. So this next mushroom is really just a bunch of puzzle pieces at this point, because unfortunately I dropped it and it broke, but it's really cool, so I just can't let it go. I found this when my friend Simon took me out hunting for Amanita Muscaria mushroom, and we found this primo location in Alberta where these mushrooms are growing abundantly. And to be honest, I didn't think Amanita Muscaria grew that well around here, but apparently if you look in the right places, they really do, because there was so much of this growing. It was kind of late in the season, so a lot of them were dried and smaller, but like there was remnants of Amanita Muscaria absolutely everywhere. And you might be wondering, like, why the heck would you want to go hunting for Amanita Muscaria? Personally, first of all, I just think Amanita Muscaria is such an amazing mushroom to find. It's just super iconic, right? Everybody knows what this mushroom is, or it's definitely recognizable. But also Amanita Muscaria has a lot of interesting potential as a medicinal mushroom, which a lot of people don't think about because there's a lot of kind of confusion around this mushroom in terms of what it actually does to the body, what compounds are actually inside of it. Even within Alberta, like, people find these mushrooms and they might not know what exact species it is because there's lots of different varieties. There's even different species like Amanita pantherina or different varieties of Amanita Muscaria, and they all have different compounds. Those compounds can be extracted in different ways, and people actually use them for all sorts of different reasons. And there's lots of people doing some really good work in this area. Simon in particular, who was the guy that took me out hunting for these, is collecting lots of them and trying to figure out exactly what is in them and what they can do. Like, for example, are the compounds contain more in the stipe, or they contain more in the fruiting body? Are they contained like just under the cap of the fruiting body? And what are the extraction methods that are required to actually get those out? So there's a lot of people that are doing some research on Amanita Muscaria. There's even some big companies in Canada that are looking at putting together an Amanita Muscaria tincture for things like dealing with anxiety, specifically for sleep, and all sorts of other potential medicinal benefits of Amanita Muscaria mushroom. So lots more to say about this one, but hopefully I can get a bunch more dried specimens that aren't just all smashed up into pieces. So finally, I got to talk about the big reishi, right? And if you've seen any or a lot of our other videos, you might have seen the big reishi as a centerpiece kind of behind me. Some people that are watching the videos know it right away, and other people are like, what is that big weird looking thing behind you? Well, that is the big reishi that was sent to me as a gift, and I'm super happy to have it. But I have seen them in markets where they were selling like huge amounts of dried mushrooms and all sorts of really crazy things, and among them were a few of these enormous reishi mushroom fruiting bodies, and I always wondered, how the heck did they grow them and I need to have one of those. The way they grow them is actually by kind of training the reishi mushroom as it grows. So it's not technically one giant fruiting body, it's a bunch of little fruiting bodies that are kind of fused together as they grow. So they grow out in kind of a tree, and then people kind of train them down as they're growing, much like you would train a plant to grow along a fence or something like that. And the end result is this big, beautiful, flat, what looks like a huge reishi mushroom. And they're not grown for medicinal purposes like a typical reishi mushroom, which would be something like this. The big reishi are specifically grown for decorative purposes, and some people make them into tables. You know, some people do, I don't know, make other pieces of furniture out of them or whatever. And me in particular, I decided I just want to put it up on my wall so I can look at it and cherish it forever. It's super, super cool, and I'm super happy to have it. That's probably the cornerstone of the dried mushroom collection, the one that trumps them all. It's the big dried reishi. Do you want to become a functional mushroom expert? I've got just the thing for you. It's a new ebook called Mushroom Powered: The History, the Science, and the Benefits of the World's Most Fantastic Fungi. At over 130 pages, it's absolutely packed with all the information you need to know to learn about the world's most powerful medicinal mushrooms. And the best part, it's 100% free. You can download it right now. Just click the link in the description, enter your email address, and I will send it to you right away. I hope you love it.